Okay, good evening, everyone. Parshas Shemos. So titled this shir, The Origins of Great Leadership. And what I'd like to do is take you through three examples, three perspectives on what you might say were particular different forms of investment by others in the personality of Moshe Rabbeinu. And perhaps we can trace through three results of that investment. That's what I'm going to do. So it's two stages, right? Firstly, three sets of examples of how three key players in his life and in his early life, and the examples that they set for him as such, and how that plays out in the future part in the next part of the parsha. Quite an adventurous kind of objective this, but we'll see how we go. Each part, of course, can be understood in its own right. So the truth is that if you look carefully, you'll see there are three figures who are involved very much in the early stages of Moshe Rabbeinu's life, and they're three women. Okay, the three women. Who are the three women? Yeah, Yocheved, his mother, obviously. Miriam, yeah, who waits there, and Basia, the daughter of Paro, whether you pronounce it Basia or Bisia, so yeah, for the grammarians. So these are the three. And each of them are unique, and there are three beautiful ideas here from Rav Shimshon Raphael Hirsch. Three separate ideas on each of them, which I think is all three of them are special. So Yocheved, what is it? What do we find with Yocheved? There's a striking Perek based posuk base. Vatera or Isha Vatelet Beit. She wears a son. Vatera Isha, and she sees ki tohu. She sees that he is good. Vatitzbeneu shlosha yerachem, and she keeps him hidden for 3 months. Now he says that the word tov is normally taken. Word tov, that word Vatera. What does it mean? Vatera soki tofu. What does that mean? She saw that he was good. That he was good. Rashi, in fact, says there, what does it mean? He's good. The house was filled with light when Moshe Rabbeinu was one. He says most of the Mepharshim understand that tov here means in the sense that he was beautiful. He was a beautiful child. Now, the problem, he says, with that shot is that every mother sees their child as beautiful. But Terah said that she was a good kid. Every mother looks at their newborn baby as beautiful and special and everything else, right? And anyway, and also, even if he hadn't been good, what mother wouldn't save their child? The whole continuation here is that she goes on, therefore she hides him away. What does that mean? Because she sees that he's good, therefore she hides him. If he wasn't good, she wouldn't hide him away, right? So it's a child. Yeah, these are basic questions that just should immediately occur to us, right? So he says like this. He says, you know what tov means? He says tov means that he was well behaved in the sense that he wouldn't cry for no reason, and therefore she had a chance to keep him hidden. It was possible because he was tov, because he was a child that, I suppose was a normal, well-balanced child. I don't know how you can see that in a newborn, but this was a child where she felt there was a potential and possibility to keep the child hidden, and all she had to do was care for him properly, satisfy his hunger and everything else. Once she looked after him as a devoted mother will do, as a result, he wouldn't cry. She'd be able to keep him. She'd be able to keep him safe and look after him. Now, according to this, what we can understand is as follows. Yocheved risks everything. That's what I think we can bring out from this idea of Hirsch. Very brief idea. We can bring out from it the fact that Yocheved symbolizes Mesiras Nefesh, right? Dedication. She keeps him hidden for 3 months. But those 3 months are like eternity. Because those 3 months she can be discovered at any time. The Gezerah of Paro to destroy, right? To kill them any time. She risks everything to keep him alive. That's what Yocheved epitomizes, this idea of Mesiras Nefesh, self-sacrifice to keep Moshe Rabbeinu and to help him survive. It was possible. Ki tofu, he was well behaved, he was a good child, therefore she had a chance. So Yocheved is Mesiras Nefesh. What about Miriam? Miriam, we see Vatesat Tzavach, so we'll come back to these as I said. The next second one is Miriam. Yeah? Miriam, it says, Posuk Daled, a few psukim later, his sister stands from afar to see what will happen and what will transpire with him. Now, this word "vatesat tzav," yeah. Now, I'm not an expert in diktuk, but it's a very difficult word. Vatesat tzav, the Meforshim really struggle with that word, Vatesat tzav, because it's Rav Hirsch brings this out, it's what they call an irregular form. Because either it should say, for example, Vatetzav, which is the kal form, which basically means she stood there, right? Vatetzav achoso, she stood there waiting, right? She stood there. Or it should say Vatisiat seiv. Now, Vatisiat seiv is basically standing there with full awareness, full intent. That form is the I don't know what exactly. I think it's the hispoil, right? It's reflexive, yeah. So but Tisyatse, but the difference is that it's more, it's much more force. Tisyatse is much more forceful. She's awareness, equals full of energy, etc. Right here, Vatesatzav is a combination, like a composite word, which basically incorporates both the simple form of Vatetzav and also Vatisyatse. So what does that symbolize? What does that symbolize? So he brings out here that generally speaking, what people do, and lahavdil, when they write a story, lahavdil elef havdalos, they write a regular story. What they do is they write a story and they say what the person in the story was feeling at the time. You write it out, right? They were feeling. They were full of trepidation, or they were feeling they had very stress. They're ready. They trembled. You write all the description in there. Okay. Now the Torah, the Dvar Hashem presents the facts as they are. The nuances are all there in the Torah. The Torah, could tell us everything that actually transpired, and it does that through the tiniest nuances. He says, "Vatisya vatesat tzav" means like this. It combines both. She went and stood there. She stood there, just stood there, right? But she suddenly found herself, while she was there, aware of the significance of the moment, as if she had been placed there by a higher force. And that's why you get Vatesat tzav. It's a combination of both, this idea, the simple sense of just going there to wait, going there to watch, but which is also, or becomes, if you like, this sudden awareness of the full impact of the moment, as if there was, Hashem is directing her to be there at that moment for this incredibly powerful moment when his life will play out, right? What is it? So what's the point here? What does Miriam symbolize according to this? And Rav Hirsch says, I'm trying to bring out from his ideas. What he says, what we can see is that Miriam represents sensing a moment of responsibility, the notion of taking achrayus. The notion of taking responsibility, the notion of being there in a split second, a moment, and realizing this is the time, this is my moment. This is when I have to realize that something critical is happening and something that I personally need to take responsibility for. So Miriam walks into the situation as just, who am I? I'm just the person sent to keep an eye on things. No. She suddenly realizes how critical her role is. Everything depends on what she has to do, okay? Dedication, that she has to have the commitment, and the fact that sometimes when you take responsibility for something, you have to take the long view. You have to realize that in a split second, things can happen, but they can have a massive effect into the future. And in fact, that is reflected, of course, famously in the reward that Miriam gets, yeah? For the, we know what is the reward that Miriam gets. Many years later, everyone waits for her, right? Everyone waits. She waits for Moshe Rabbeinu. So when she gets Toras, everyone waits for her, right? So with Miriam, there's this sense of understanding that a moment is critical and crucial, and it may take a long time for it to be realized that it's the case, but understanding that those little small moments when you take responsibility for something are absolutely crucial. That's achrayus. The third is Basya. Now, Basya names Moshe Rabbeinu Moshe, Kimin Amayim Shesiu, Pasuk Yud, right? Because I drew him out of the water. Lots that there, Meforshim Rashi goes through this in quite detail. In detail, Moshe Rabbeinu's name. First is something very, very straightforward. He says like this. He says, she did not name him Moshui. Moshui is someone who is drawn out of the water. Instead, she names him Moshe. Moshe is one who delivers from the water. It seems counterintuitive. He should be the one he should be called Moshui. He was drawn out of the water. I drew him from the water. Why is he called Moshe, the one who draws out from the water? Says Rav Hirsch, because this perhaps indicates the chinuch that from the very first moment she wanted to impart to him. Ultimately, he was her foster son. She was going to decide the primary role that she had was the primary caregiver. She was bringing him up. She did not give birth to him, but she would bring him up. And the chinuch that she wanted to impart within him from that very first moment, from the time she gave his name, was never forget that you were thrown into the water and I drew you out of the water. So you need to always be a Moshe. You need to, in turn, be a deliverer of others, right? A deliverer of others at all times. So it's in other words, it's emblematic of the type of chinuch he would go on to receive. It wasn't that just she was saying, she didn't call him, these were your origins, you were drawn out of the water. No, this is your mission. Your mission is to be a Moshe, to deliver others. That was the chinuch. And he also says, interestingly as well, how did she give him a Hebrew name? She was an Egyptian princess. Where does she know Hebrew from? So she must have consulted, he says, with his mother to see before she gave the name, logically, right? Otherwise, she would have given him an Egyptian name. So interesting. But what he says is that the other thing the Hebrew name, of course, did is it always gave him a consciousness of his origins, always reminded him of where he came from. So what we have here, let's just recap the three together. Yocheved, Miriam, and Basia, the three key female figures, the women who actually really install everything in Moshe Rabbeinu in his early life. Yocheved symbolizes Mesiras Nefesh, that idea of risking all for the ultimate cause, which is what she does by hiding him for those first 3 months. His sister, recognizing that word Vatesatzav, she takes achrayas, she takes responsibility. She realizes that sometimes you're in a situation where it seems like insignificant, but actually you are the one who is tasked with the responsibility, the critical responsibility at that moment. And finally, Basia, and the idea of the chinuch that he would receive to be the Moshe, to be the deliverer of others, and that was how he was to live his life. And of course, that plays out specifically in the ways that we are familiar with, particularly in terms of the mitzvah of the Egyptian. And we're going to do it in this way. So we're going to go now in reverse order, okay? And we're going to begin with Basia, and then how this idea kind of plays out later on in the parsha, and then go from there to Miriam, and finally to Yocheved. Sorry, I'm not trying to make things confusing. It's just I think it works better this way. You'll see. so let's begin. Let's begin with this. So in a way, the most straightforward of all three of these, I would say, is the last. Right, the idea that we're familiar with this. Right, Moshe Rabbeinu. This is a very, very famous idea. The idea that if you look through Moshe Rabbeinu's early story, you see it's Mefurish in the Psukim. Rashi brings it out, right? That he goes out, the Arasiv Losam, he sees their burdens, right? That's how it is. That's the whole story begins that way. He sees the Egyptian and everything, right? We know, yeah. This is what he does. What he does is he makes sure that he is the one who saves others. Does that. He realizes that he has to rescue others. But I came across an amazing medrash, which I think casts a much deeper light on this, and it shines a light on literally from one end of the Torah to the other, and it makes this I think so much deeper, this idea. If you take a look at Perek Beis Posuk, Perek Beis much later on, Perek Beis Posuk Tezvov, yes, that's right. So when Paro hears Vayishma Paros Adovar Hazeh, when he hears that Moshe Rabbeinu has killed the Egyptian, and Moshe is very scared, Ochenu the Hadovar, and Vayivakish Lareg is Moshe, he seeks to kill Moshe Rabbeinu. Vayivrach Moshe Bnei Paro, Moshe runs away. Vayeshev Eretz Midjan, and he dwells in Eretz Midjan. Vayeshev al HaBe'er, and he dwells by the Be'er, the well of water. The well of water. Now, what we have is the Medrash says the following thing. One second. He goes to Midjan, Vayeshev al HaBe'er, and he sits by this well. Dova Acha, says the Medrash, because it's going on other ideas as well. Oz Yavdil Moshe. Then Moshe would separate. What does it mean, Oz Yavdil Moshe? Parshas Akev. Yes, I think it's an Akev. It is an Akev, yeah? Oz Yavdil Moshe. Moshe Rabbeinu separates the three, the Ori Miklot, that on the other side of the Yarden. You remember? Before they go, because those are the part of the mitzvah that he can do before they enter Eretz Yisrael. They're going to be the cities of refuge, which are going to be separated inside Eretz Yisrael, 3 inside Eretz Yisrael, 3 on the other side of the Yarden. Oz Yavdil Moshe Shlosh Aramein. He is able to separate He's not going to go into Eretz Israel, but he does what he can do, which is the 3 Ori Miklot on that side of the Yarden, so that if someone kills B'Shogeg, they are able to run to these cities of refuge. Omar Rabbi Evu, what's that got to do with this? Kivon Shebarach Moshe, when Moshe Rabbeinu ran away, Hischil Omer Shira, he began to sing a song, a Shira. Shenema Vayeshev Eretz Midian Vayeshev ala Be'er. He went to Midian and he sat by the well. Ma Yisrael Omu Shira ala Be'er. Klal Yisrael, much later on Parshas Chukas, will sing Shira by the Be'er. Af Moshe Omar Shira ala Be'er. So Moshe Rabbeinu also sang a Shira by a well. By a well. Omar Rabbi Levi lefi she'ira Parsha Soritzeach al Yodoi ba'Ori Miklot. Because the Parsha of murderers, right, those who kill B'Shogeg, would happen and transpire through Moshe Rabbeinu through the Ori Miklot, the cities of refuge. So what's going on here? We're throwing together all these different ideas together. But you suddenly hear this message, you think, hold on a second, there's a theme here. There's a well, right? Moshe Rabbeinu goes and sits by a well, a Be'er. Later on, we're going to have the well of Miriam, the Be'er Miriam, right? And there will be a Shira by the Be'er. And we have an Oz Yavdil Moshe. Moshe will separate the 3 cities. And what's the connection with that and a Shira? This is a medrash in a number of places. The word Oz, Oz Yoshir Moshe, and you have Oz Yavdil Moshe. Okay, you got to hold these different things together in your head, but it's worth it. Okay, it's worth it, right? So, in the footnotes to the Toras Chaim brings this medrash, the medrash in Devarim Rabbah. It's not medrash here; it's a medrash in Devarim. But the Toras Chaim brings this here on this week's parsha, and he brings there's a manuscript. There's a manuscript of this medrash. This is a bit of a detective story, right? There's a manuscript of this medrash Rabbah from a Ksav Yad in Oxford. Okay, they have their manuscripts at Oxford University. It's true, right? Yeah, from Parshas Chanan, which expands this medrash and brings more meaning to it. And it says like this. Let me read you the expanded version of this medrash. Oz Yavdil Moshe. Mahu Oz. What does it mean then? Then Moshe separated 3 cities of refuge. Zeh Shira. This is a song. Shnema Oz Yoshir Moshe. As it says, Moshe sang Oz and Oz. He separates it. The word Oz refers to a song, a Shira. Mi Omar Shira. Who sang a song? Moshe Omar Shira. Loma. Why? Why did Moshe sing a song? Why did Moshe sing a song when he arrives at the well in Midian? You know why? Shehu Horag Es Hanefesh. Because he killed someone. He killed someone. When they were subjugated with all the hard labor, what does it say? He killed an Egyptian. When he killed the Mitzri, now you're beginning to see what's going on here. Yeah. Barach le'ir miklot. He runs away to a city of refuge, so to speak. Vayivrach Moshe mipnei Paro. He runs away from Paro. Vayeshev al habe'er. And he sits by the well. Ma vayeshev al habe'er. What does it mean he sits by the well? She'omar shiro. He sang Shira, Shne'emah, as the song, as it says, Oz Yoshir Moshe. Then Moshe would sing, and again, the Oz Yoshir Moshe, link that to the Oz Yavdil Moshe, the pasuk that it says about the separating of the Ori Miklot. Now, this is the key line. V'loma Omar Shira. Why did he sing? Shehu hoya yodea tzara shalotzeach. Because he knew how painful it would be for someone killing B'Shogeg. Because he did it. So the word Oz is used when he separates the cities of the Ori Miklot. You see, this is a beautiful idea. When he separates the cities of the Ori Miklot, why does the word Torah use the word then? Oz Yavdil Moshe, because Moshe Rabbeinu, like Oz Yoshir Moshe, is able to sing Shira then as well, because he knows that someone who has done the worst and most unthinkable thing, they have to live the rest of their lives, this horrific tragedy, killed B'Shogeg, yeah, right? A horrific tragedy. They can still have a place of refuge. They can go somewhere that is safe for them, that they can somehow continue their lives. The Medrash finishes off. Someone who eats from a dish knows the taste of the dish. You know, he's been involved in it as well. Once Hashem had told him, hinted the healing that would eventually transpire, Hischil Moshe Omar Shira. That's why Moshe Rabbeinu said, sang Shira Shne'emar Oz Yoshir. Oz Yoshir. Therefore, he sang a song. He sang Shira for this reason. And there's there are other similar versions of this medrash elsewhere, which say similar ideas. you killed the Egyptian. That's why you will be the one to separate the Ori Miklot, so that if someone else kills B'Shogeg, they will be able to run away there and escape. Now, as a matter of a fine point, which is important to point out here, and the notes here from Menachem Kasha, who wrote the Perush on Toras Shlema, he points this out, that there are the difficulty, of course, is that he didn't kill the mitzvah b'shogeg, yeah, which is difficult, and he says these midrashim are clearly understanding that he only intended to deal with him, lahakoso liyasru, to afflict him and to smite him, but he ended up dying. And he didn't actually intend to kill him, yeah, according to his midrashim. Now others dispute this. There are other midrashim say he did intend to kill. So again, Hargo b'shem Amafurish, he killed him with the name of Hashem. We've got lots of different midrashim taking different perspectives. But the beauty of this idea, which I think is incredible, is apart from the fact that it links it, and we needed that detective piece he brings from this manuscript in Oxford, otherwise you wouldn't understand the Medrash Rabbah, I think, without it. But it's very powerful, because all of a sudden Moshe Rabbeinu is the one who, again, let's go back to what we're discussing here. The idea of delivering and saving others and going out there and looking out for others. It's easy if they're people you can relate to and you can see eye to eye with, and they're upstanding members of society. What about the guy who kills B'Shogeg? The guy everyone's looking at as if they are, he's the Nebuch, and he's never got no redemption, no redemptive qualities. He's the Rotseach and whatever, and who knows whether he did it B'Shogeg. All these things. Moshe Rabbeinu is the one who establishes the Orei Miklot. When he runs away from Paro and he sits there by the Be'er, he sings Shira by that Be'er, because one day, later on, he will be the one who will follow the same path and be the one who is able to separate those Orei Miklot for those people who kill B'Shogeg, so they too have a place that they can be, if you like, delivered from and redeemed and saved. So it provides a totally new depth to the sense of compassion that's embedded in Moshe Rabbeinu from the outset, to bring others, to uplift others, to deliver them from their stage in life. That's the first piece. Now, the second one was achrayus, responsibility. Now, Rav Dessler here brings a medrash which basically says the medrash brings out on the something which seems an unusual way to look at how Moshe Rabbeinu becomes what he becomes. And the Medrash says that what we find is that there were two people, at least two, I think that there are other examples of that, who are first examined through the way they relate to sheep. And if they relate to sheep in a positive way, they are able to be leaders of Klal Yisrael. Now you can think of many, because there's Yaakov and there's David HaMelech, exactly, right? The sheep is a recurring, the shepherds is a recurring theme. But what Rav Dessler says is he brings a medrash which goes into this in a bit more detail, that the sheep are a test, and they're deliberately a test with a small matter. They are able to test a person with something very, very small. So the sheep, Moshe Rabbeinu and David HaMelech, are both into a situation where they are led into a part, they are encouraged to lead the sheep into the desert. They both do the same thing, David HaMelech and Moshe Rabbeinu. They lead them achar hamidbar. He takes the sheep achar hamidbar in Pasuk Perek Gimel Pasuk Aleph. Yeah, he takes them achar hamidbar. What is the idea of going after the midbar? The idea is to make sure they don't graze from other people's fields. Okay, that's how it is. So they don't trespass. Okay, so Rav Dessler seeks to understand, why is it that testing someone in terms of their leadership qualities with a very small act is something which is preferable than giving them a big test? We have other examples in the Torah of big tests, like Avraham Avinu, right? Why is it that this particular approach is to take the small test as if that, that's going to be the, that's the litmus. Why is it a tiny thing as a litmus test? He actually brings a fascinating Gemara, where the Gemara tells a story of Rabbi Chanina ben Trajan. I think it's more in Tanis, actually. Might not be. Anyway, Rabbi Chanina ben Trajan, basically, no, I don't think it is. Sorry, it's an Avodah Zarah. Yeah, Rabbi Chanina ben Trajan was basically, there was a gezerah not to learn Torah in public, and he visits Rabbi Yosef ben Kisma, and Rabbi Yosef ben Kisma says to him, how can you teach Torah barabim in public with the Sefer Torah? The Romans are going to destroy us, etc., etc. And he says, And he says, you're finished, basically. Rabbi Yossi says to him, no, you're not going to survive, and you better start thinking about the Olam Haba. That's what he says to him. So Rabbi Yossi so Rabbi Chanina says to him, so tell me then, he says to Rabbi Yossi ben Kisma, he says, what are my prospects? What are my chances in Olam Haba? And he says, Rabbi Yossi says to him, well, let's have a look. Let's find out what you've done in your life, and we'll see whether your prospects are like for Olam Haba. So Rabbi Chanina says, he asks him, what have you done? So Rabbi Chanina says, he said, I once had money that I set aside for Sudas Purim. Yeah, this is a Gemara in Avodah Zarah, right? And beside it, there was money. Remember that were collected for tzedakah. Okay, and the two lots of money became mixed up. And instead of repaying myself the amount I needed for the Suda of Purim, I distributed all of it for tzedakah. Because it had already become all mixed up, I just gave the whole thing to tzedakah. And Rabbi Yossi ben Kisma hears that, and he says, if only I could have your share in Olam Haba for that. It's exactly the same thing. Of all the things Rabbi Chanina ben Trajan did, he was teaching Torah, Barabbim, risking his life. He was going to be murdered by the Romans. He was one of the Soror Gemalchus, yeah? Because of this, and yet it's this tiny act. It's this tiny act. Says Rav Dessler, what is it? He says like this, he says, large things, the big deal, the things that are the showpiece events, they don't reflect the true ruchnius of the person, the real spiritual status. The big things can be momentary enthusiasm, they can be external in nature, sometimes great things. There's always an eye to the public, what are people saying, what are they going to do, whatever. The small things, the real character test, the real revelation of a person's madrega is in the small things, which a person themselves doesn't attach anything to at the time. They think it's such a small and insignificant thing, but that's the real test of a person's character. And that is why, says Rav Dessler, you find that the idea that Hashem takes the little things and says that is the real litmus test. So here we have, this is the idea and the sense of taking responsibility. You see, Miriam is in a position where, to link to what we started with, right? Miriam is in a position where you think she has a very minor role to play. She's like the middle person, she's keeping an eye on things. She realizes that my role isn't minor at all. It's significant, it's meaningful, it's important, it's critical. And that is what Moshe Rabbeinu realizes as well by passing the test with the sheep. It's as critical as leading Klal Yisrael is making sure that your sheep don't graze in someone else's field. That's the lesson he learns, right? From that, or those origins. And finally, we've only got a few minutes. Let's just cover briefly the third one. The third one was Yocheved, the Mesiras Nefesh, the way Yocheved was everything. And this is something where we have to understand there's a massive gaping hole in Parshas Shemos. Okay, you know that? There's a hole. Why is the hole in Parshas Shemos? There is basically 60 years unaccounted for. You know that, right? Pretty much 60 years, right? Moshe Rabbeinu goes back to Paro, he's 80 years old. So you jump 60 years. Like it's a huge gap where it's missing. Everything's missing there. There's almost nothing there describing what transpired. There are some incredible midrashim about Moshe Rabbeinu, how what he did during those years. He became a king somewhere, I think. There's a whole story, went to Africa. There's also, midrashim trying to fill the gap here. What happened during all those years? But the Torah is silent. The Torah is silent. Soloveitchik has a beautiful piece on this where he says that this whole period represents Hester upon him. It represents the period of Hashem concealing his face. It's a tragic time. It's a tragic, tragic time. And that's why you have these very few psukim in the middle, yeah, where Moshe Rabbeinu goes, Vayihi Pasuk Chov Gimel, Perek Beis Pasuk Chov Gimel, Vayihi Vayom Rab Mohem, Vayomos Melech Yitzram, Vayonchu Bnei Yisrael Min Huavoda. They cry out, right? There's nothing that they can't see anything in sight. What's going to happen? How are they going to get out of this? Hashem, so to speak, is a period of Hester upon him, concealing his face, and they cannot see an end to it. And Moshe Rabbeinu himself, he runs away, and we see he says now it's known. And Rashi brings that famous medrash which says that Moshe Rabbeinu is so puzzled, and he's telling why is it that they are suffering so much? What is going on? Why is it that why are they being persecuted so much? And then he sees that there are informers amongst Klal Yisrael. They're speaking Lashon Hara. You remember this medrash, right? Rashi, right? They're speaking Lashon Hara because otherwise, how would they know? How would they know that I killed them? People now I see that maybe they might deserve this. That's what he's worried. That's what it says. That's what the medrash says. That's what the medrash says. And therefore, he says like this. Or Soloveitchik says that these words These words, Ochei Noda Hadover, is not just a prelude to him running away from Egypt, but also his own alienation from them, like on a personal level, because he expected them to see them at the level of Avraham and Yitzchak and Yaakov. And unfortunately, he sees that's not so great and things aren't so good at the moment. So he goes and settles somewhere else and he runs away. He's also distanced himself in this way. But Hashem says to him like this. This period of darkness occurs, and then Hashem appears to Moshe Rabbeinu and he says, "Vayom Hashem ro'oi ro'isi es oni ami asher b'mitzrayim." Right? Perek Gimel Posuk Zayin. He says, "I have seen the affliction. I have heard." Right? Soloveitchik says that phrase "ro'oi ro'isi," I have seen, is actually almost an indictment of Moshe Rabbeinu himself. It's saying, Hashem is saying to Moshe Rabbeinu, you said Ochein Noida Hadovar, and you said maybe they're telling tales and they're speaking on they're acting in an incorrect way. Hashem says to him, your perspective on them was superficial. It was only on the surface. You have to understand, Ro'o Ro'isi, I have a much deeper and profound understanding of who they really are. And they may not display at the moment the chesed of Avraham and Yitzchak and Yaakov, and they may look outwardly as if they're not in a madrega anymore and they've gone so far down. But deep down, they are worthy. You need to understand, like you were shown by your, this is, those who doesn't make this link, this is, I'm adding to it in this way, making that link to your cheved. You received that tremendous Mesiras Nefesh from your mother. She stayed the course through those months. She risked everything. She risked everything. She had the Mesiras Nefesh. She risked that time. She stayed the course. When Hashem says to Moshe Rabbeinu, you need to do the same thing. Those years of waiting and delay, you can't give up on them. Don't give up on them. Stay committed. Because Ro'e Ro'isi, I've seen that deep down, they are worthy of Geula, and you should see the same thing. You need to understand that lesson as well. You need to stay the course. So what we have, therefore, is it all links up together. You have the message that is transmitted by Basya, the idea of the fact that he will deliver others. As we said, it goes as far as providing the Ori Miklot. He sings Shira over that. He can even provide for Rotzchem. We have the level of responsibility, the Achrayas of Miriam, the idea that he takes responsibility for those sheep. And that's the real litmus test of his character. And finally, the idea of Mesiras Nefesh. Yocheved is committed. She stays the course. She has that dedication not to give up, to keep going. And Moshe Rabbeinu is the one who has to learn and does learn the same thing. And over those periods, that whole conversation, when HaKadosh Baruch Hu convinces him to do so, that's what indeed he does. And as a result, he becomes the leader of Klal Yisrael. That's the origin of great leadership. Thank you all for listening. Have a good Shabbos.
Shkoyach. Thank you so much.
Okay, have a good Shabbos.